You gotta wonder why some homes sit abandoned for decades, especially big, huge mansions. What dark secrets have led to these places being left to rot? Gruesome crimes, disturbing hauntings, curses? Let's find out. One look at Villa de Vecchi in Italy, and it's really no surprise that it has such a dark past. I mean, it just looks like it fits the bill. Of course, being abandoned and derelict never helps matters, but still, the place looks pretty haunted. It's now become known as one of the most haunted spots in Italy, often referred to as the House of Witches. It was built in 1857 as a summer home for a man named Felix de Vecchi and his family, who suffered a lot of tragedy in the years following. Things were kind of foreboding from the start when the architect died during the construction of the building, but the real horror began in 1862. The story goes that Felix de Vecchi came home to find his wife killed and his daughter missing. The famous occultist Aleister Crowley is said to have also practiced rituals on the property. The place has been totally vacant for decades, but strange stuff still goes on, like the avalanche in 2002 that leveled everything in the area except the House of Witches, which was left completely untouched. Next on the list is the Lucy House in Uniontown, Alabama. Now, many homes in Uniontown stand totally abandoned. Environmental issues have driven a huge portion of the population out, but the Lucy House isn't just another abandoned home being overtaken by nature. No, this one is home to a very dark case. In 1994, the remains of a boy named Alan Lucy were found buried under the front porch, putting an end to a decade-old mystery. Alan Lucy lived in the home with his adoptive parents, Philip and Margaret Lucy. In May of 1985, he went missing though. A search was launched, but there were no signs of him anywhere. But then a creepy story started to spread around town. The couple's biological son, Jason, began telling classmates at school that he'd seen his father burying Alan after having killed him. Now, for some reason, his story was never taken seriously until the home had been sold and renovations were underway, and the skeletal remains of Alan Lucy were finally found. Philip Lucy was then put behind bars. The Liu family mansion, aka the Mingjiang Ghost House in Taiwan, has been abandoned for over 70 years, and it's known as one of the most haunted spots in the country. The Liu family packed up and left, and it's always been a bit of a mystery as to why. There are plenty of rumors and urban legends though, of course. One story goes that the maid was having an affair with the husband, Liu Rongyu, and when the wife found out, she made the maid's life a living hell until she couldn't handle it anymore, jumping down a well. But she wasn't gone for good. On a nightly basis, the tormented spirit of the maid would return to the home, terrorizing the family until they finally decided it was time to pack up and leave. Some say her ghost still haunts the abandoned property to this day. Another tale tells of Japanese soldiers who were holding up at the abandoned mansion during World War II. While the soldiers slept, one was keeping guard, but things turned to complete chaos when he caught a glimpse of this shadowy figure lurking around the property and opened fire. The other soldiers then woke up and in a panic started shooting too, but in the darkness and confusion they all died, having accidentally fired at each other. Next up, we have the Los Feliz house, which sat abandoned in LA's Los Feliz neighborhood for a long time. It was only just recently sold in 2020. 2475 Glendower Place is pretty infamous for a very disturbing incident on December 6th, 1959. Dr. Harold Perelson and his family lived at the home. Dr. Perelson was pretty successful, obviously. I mean, he owned a mini mansion, but at some point his mental state began to deteriorate, and the nail in the coffin was when he was screwed out of the rights to a new syringe he'd invented, having invested a ton of money in it as well. This is seemingly what threw him over the edge, and on that night in December, he snapped, killing his wife in her sleep with a hammer. Then he moved on to his eldest daughter's room. As soon as he struck her with the hammer though, she let out a scream and began pleading for her life as her father told her to lay still and keep quiet. The other siblings woke up though, all running out in the hallway to find out what was going on. Miraculously, they all managed to escape, Neighbors had heard the commotion and phoned the police, but by the time authorities arrived at the home, a copy of Dante's The Divine Comedy was left open on his nightstand, with the opening passage of the page reading, "Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward path had been lost." Next on the list is Lennox Castle in Scotland, which has sat abandoned for years. It's in total disrepair and has been in especially bad shape after a fire in 2008. The place looks like your quintessential haunted castle, but double whammy, it was also a former mental hospital. It was originally built in 1841 for John Lennox Kincaid, who had ties to a notable Scottish clan. But in 1927, the land was purchased by the Glasgow Corporation, and the castle underwent a big transformation, being repurposed as a hospital for the mentally ill. Then in World War II, it was converted into a hospital for soldiers, and the mentally ill patients were transported to other buildings on the property. Life inside Lennox Castle was far from peaceful. Fights between patients were common. In one incident, a riot broke out, causing chaos and significant damage to one of the wards. Things got so out of hand that a lot of the staff, along with uninvolved patients, fled the hospital, leaving the rioters locked inside. By the 80s, the hospital had become completely outdated, and it finally closed in 2002, and it's been vacant ever since. There are tons of abandoned mansions on what is often referred to as Billionaires Row in London, but one of them has a particularly dark history. One of these mansions, Kingsdean, was used by one of the creepiest cults in history, the Children of God, now called the Family International. If you feel like getting a good night's sleep tonight, this is a cult you're gonna probably want to avoid hearing about. The group was founded in the late 60s by dirtbag David Berg, who later became known as Moses David. The group mixed evangelical Christianity with free love ideology, regardless of age. Female members were encouraged to use intimacy in order to recruit new followers. It was highly exploitative, especially of course when it came to young people who had been born and raised within the cult. Over the years, as more survivors came forward with their stories, authorities began to investigate the COG. Leadership has changed, but the fact that this group is still around in any form is just unbelievable. The house in New Jersey where this next awful tragedy took place burnt down in the 70s, but the property is still said to have a lingering dark energy about it, and it's not hard to see why. This case is pretty grim, and the new home is pretty much identical to the old one. So in 1971, a man named John List killed his wife, his mother, and 2 offspring, all in the home. Then he left the house, went to his son's soccer game as if nothing had happened, and then killed him too once they returned home. Then he brought all the bodies into the ballroom, lined them up, cut his own face out of a family photo, and left the scene. Authorities later arrived at the home to find the bodies. All the lights were also on and the radio was blaring, tuned into a Christian radio station. John List wasn't caught until 1989. He'd fled to Denver and taken on a whole new identity. He'd even met a woman there who he'd married in 1985. The Winchester Mansion in San Jose, California is not only said to be one of the most haunted mansions in the United States, but one of the strangest. And not just one of the strangest mansions in America, but the entire world. This place is absolutely bonkers. And that's all because of Sarah Winchester, who is the wife of William Wirt Winchester of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. When Mr. Winchester died in 1881, the widowed Sarah became a little unhinged, to say the least. She began to believe that the people who'd died at the hands of her husband's Winchester rifles were now haunting her. So she started hiring workers to come in and build all these add-ons to the home, very few of which made any sense at all. The purpose? To disorient and confuse the ghosts that were apparently after her. The Winchester was always under construction. Maze-like hallways and staircases were built, leading nowhere. Doors were built for no apparent reason, and it just went on and on. The place is one big confusing nightmare, like an AI algorithm just took over with the design, not actually understanding the purpose of a home. That's a place I kind of want to check out, to be honest. Elda Castle in New York looks like a witch's house from an old fairy tale. tale. Not on the inside though. Graffiti covers the walls as the place has been abandoned for decades. There's been a rumor floating around for years that Elda Castle is cursed. The castle was the brainchild of David T. Abercrombie, the dude who helped kickstart Abercrombie and Fitch. He and his wife, Lucy Abbott Kate, were like, let's build a huge mansion. So they did, in the roaring 20s. But then, just as the paint dried and the mansion was all set, tragedy hit. First, their daughter Lucy died in an accident at her dad's factory. Then, Mr. Abercrombie himself died of rheumatic fever right there in the house. So Lucy Abbott Kate moved away with her oldest daughter. After Lucy Sr. split though, Elda fell into disrepair. Over the years, a bunch of different people have tried to fix the place up, hoping to bring it back to its former glory, but each time they've been hit with rough patches themselves. Maybe this is a place that's just better off left alone. And finally, we have the Mudhouse Mansion in Lancaster, Ohio. This is just one of the many spooky spots in the great state of Ohio. An old, creepy house with a history full of equally eerie tales and urban legends. It was originally built back in the mid-1800s, a fancy home for a rich family, but as years passed, the mansion started to fall apart. Eventually, it was abandoned and left to rot. Over time, though, people began to tell stories about the mansion. One of the creepiest stories is that the family who lived there met a tragic end inside the mansion. Some versions of the legend say they were killed by someone. Others claim they went crazy after an evil entity attached itself to the house and tormented them. There's even a tale that Bloody Mary herself was born here. In 2015, the mansion was torn down, but that hasn't stopped all the stories. Some folks say they still see ghostly figures wandering around the area where the mansion used to stand. And we're starting off this list with 300 Kim Ma Street in Hanoi, Vietnam. This compound has sat abandoned for over 30 years, and it's said to be one of the most haunted houses in the entire city. There are all kinds of tales surrounding the place. People have claimed to see objects move on their own, semi-translucent or shadowy figures have been seen lurking about, and in the dead of night, ghostly screams are often heard from within the walls. This picture here has made the rounds for a while. As you can see, there's a man standing in front of the gate of the property, and in the background, you can clearly see what looks to be a ghostly figure in a white robe lurking behind him. Now, is this actually just a person who is very much alive, roaming through the abandoned property in a long white robe? At night, possibly, but there could also be a ghost afoot. Number 9, the Yeongdeok House in South Korea. If you ever find yourself in South Korea and feel like taking a spooky trip, you can visit this abandoned house. It's about a 3-hour high-speed train ride from Seoul, but you just might meet a ghost or 10, so maybe it's worth it for you. Plus, apparently you can just roam around for free. The Yeongdeok House is the final resting place of hundreds of soldiers. Around 700 of them died on this land during the Korean War, and of course their spirits are still said to haunt the property. As it turns out, the soldiers are all buried there. The home was built on a mass grave. Every owner who lived in the house experienced terrible misfortune. Not only did they encounter these tortured spirits, but they each met untimely deaths. Word got out about how seemingly cursed this home was, and nobody wanted to live there. It was eventually abandoned at some point in the 80s. Next up, we have the Edmonton Haunted House. Now, I'm not clear as to the name of the owner of this house or the exact location, only that it is or was in Edmonton. This is an old story dating back to 1909. The owner would rent the house out, but they had a hard time securing regular tenants as each person who stayed there would rush out of the home, oftentimes in well under a month. An article at the time is quoted as saying, "From time to time, parties of different nationalities have approached the owner of the house and rented it, sometimes for a year, other times only for a few months. But generally, at the expiration of a few hours, they disappeared, bag and baggage, without even calling up the owner for a refund of the monies paid. The owner and his agent unaware of their departure until the next month's rent was due." Tenants would experience horrific paranormal activity in the home, with one story going that a tenant had locked himself in his room with furniture pressed up against the door, and yet somehow the door opened on its own, and from the dark hallway beyond, he heard a terrible disembodied groaning sound. Another story goes that an Asian businessman had rented out the home with 4 of his workers. They were planning to operate a laundry business from the home. They didn't even make it through the first night and fled from the home in the middle of the night, returning in the morning to collect their belongings. And at number 7, we have the Whaley House. Thomas Whaley began constructing this beautiful San Diego home in 1856, having proclaimed, "My new house, when completed, will be the handsomest, most comfortable and convenient place in town or within 150 miles of here." It sounds like something Donald Trump would say. "My house is going to be the best place. We're 150 miles, but it's most comfortable. Everyone's gonna love it. It's gonna be the talk of the town." Anyway, for a long time, it actually was. It wasn't just the Whaley family home. It became the focal point of the entire town. There was a theater, a general store. It was the county courthouse. The San Diego County government rented out a portion of the home for its offices and records. There was a lot going on at this place, but the party started to end when the family began experiencing paranormal activity in the home. They would hear heavy footsteps making their way throughout the hallways at night, ghostly moans coming from throughout the house. They believed it was the spirit of a man named James Yankee Jim Robinson, who had been hanged on the property after stealing a boat. Harsh time to live. Steal a boat, you deserve death, sir. Not long after these paranormal experiences began, one of the daughters, Violet, took her own life, and the Whaleys ended up leaving the home, building a new one downtown. Number 6, the Borley Rectory. Built in 1862 in Essex, this home was once known as the most haunted house in England. It served as a residence for the Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull and his family. Reports of strange occurrences, including unexplained footsteps, mysterious lights, eerie sounds, they began being reported around 1900 when 4 of Henry's daughters claimed to have seen a ghostly nun in the yard. And instead of going inside like any rational person would do in that situation, they decided to run over and try to talk with her, but the nun started to vanish the closer they got, apparently. And the rectory gained widespread attention when paranormal investigator Harry Price conducted an investigation there in 1929. At this time, there was a different family living in the home who had also started experiencing paranormal activity, like servant bells ringing even though they had all been disconnected. Price's research led to claims of the Borley Nun, a phantom coach, and other ghostly apparitions said to haunt the property. His findings were published in his book, The Most Haunted House in England, further fueling the rectory's haunted reputation, and the stories surrounding the Borley Rectory varied, with tales of tragic events such as a phantom nun and a supposed love affair ending in a unaliving. These stories added to the intrigue and really fed to this belief that this place was just a hotbed of paranormal activity. Number 5, the figure. This next story was posted to Reddit by user u/Kim Jong Funk. It goes like this. When I was in elementary school, I shared a queen-size bed with my older sister and our family dog, a mutt that looked like a short-haired lassie. We'd sleep on the foot of our bed every night. When I was about 6 years old, I woke up one night around midnight and saw a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. The figure was entirely in black without any eyes or a face. I tried to wake up my sister, but she rolled over to go back to sleep. And my sister must have accidentally kicked the dog, because the dog woke up and raised her head and started growling at the figure at the foot of the bed. The growling then woke up my sister, and she saw the figure and started screaming. When my parents came into the room and turned the light on, nothing was there. To this day, both my sister and I are adamant that we saw a ghost or other demon on our room. We know we weren't crazy either because the dog saw it too. Next up, we have the Lalaurie Mansion. The Lalaurie Mansion in New Orleans has a notorious history dating back to the mid-1800s. Built by Dr. Louis Lalaurie, who lived there with his wife Delphine in 1832, the mansion's dark secrets became public knowledge around 1834. Reports of cruelty and mistreatment of slaves led to a pretty shocking discovery of a torture chamber in the attic, revealing the gruesome reality of their actions, especially on Delphine's part. She was a full-on sadistic, cruel, evil woman. Reminds me a lot of Elizabeth Bathory, but worse, and some of the things that went on here are unimaginable. She would like break her victims' bones repeatedly, just completely deforming them. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. They were complete monsters. Over the years, the mansion gained a reputation, of course, for being haunted, with claims of ghostly apparitions and eerie occurrences going on there. Local legends and ghost stories have attributed the haunting to the tormented spirits of the victims who suffered within its walls. Next on the list, we have the Sally House. The Sally House in Atchison, Kansas now stands completely abandoned due to its rather dark history. Several deaths are known to have taken place in the home, including the home's original owner, Michael Finney, Richard Edwin Finney, William True, Agnes Finney True, and a young girl named Sally, who had collapsed due to a severe abdominal pain. She was brought to the home by her mother so that the town doctor who lived there could tend to her. He determined that she had appendicitis and that there was no time to delay a surgery. He started the surgery before the anesthesia had fully taken effect, and Sally woke up on the operating table when she suddenly died, apparently from shock. Her spirit was said to linger within the home, and years later, 1993, a young couple moved in. They claimed that their dog would bark at random empty spots in the home, especially in the upstairs nursery. Soon the man would begin receiving scratches on his body from an unknown source. The room that was formerly used for operations would become cold at times, and objects would sometimes move on their own. Suffice to say, that couple didn't live there for long, and the home is now used for paranormal investigations, where paranormal occurrences are still reported on to this day. Barry Pomeroy Castle, located in Devon, England. This place has a history dating back to the 15th century. It was originally built by the Pomeroy family, but later came under the ownership of the Seymours, a prominent noble family closely connected to the Tudor royalty. Over the years, the castle witnessed a series of renovations and expansions, but despite its impressive architecture and kind of picturesque setting, I mean, it's a castle, it looks beautiful, Barry Pomeroy Castle has also gained a reputation for being haunted, especially after having been abandoned in the late 17th century. Stories of supernatural occurrences and sightings have been reported on the property. One of the most famous tales involves the White Lady, believed to be the spirit of Margaret Pomeroy, who was allegedly imprisoned by her jealous sister and left to starve to death. Another ghostly figure is said to be the Blue Lady, and this one's really creepy though, because it's the soul of Eleanor Seymour, who reportedly fell to her death from the tower. And the Blue Lady is said to lure unsuspecting men to dangerous parts of the castle, especially the tower, where they'll fall to their death. Some claim to hear unexplained sounds and experience other strange phenomena. Tourists and visitors have reported feelings of unease and the sensation of being watched while exploring the ruins. And finally, we have the Amityville Horror House. Everyone has heard that name before. There have been tons of horror movies and books based on the goings-on in this house, and the tales surrounding it have become pretty famous in American folklore. For starters, 23-year-old Ron DeFeo Jr. had taken the lives of both his parents and his 4 siblings in the home as they slept. In 1975, the Lutz family purchased the home, but after just 28 days, they left, claiming to have experienced a string of paranormal occurrences. They said to have seen ooze sliding down their walls. There was a strange odor in the home, probably from the ooze. They'd hear doors slam on their own, as well as other objects moving, and they encountered swarms of flies right in the middle of winter. Even if there was no demonic spirit involved, yeah, I'd be out of that house with all that gross crap going on too.
Starting us off at number 10 is Maple Hill Cemetery. Founded in 1822, this cemetery is the oldest and largest burial ground in the state, where roughly 80,000 people have been laid to rest. But with that many souls in one place, it only takes a matter of time before people start noticing something strange happening. While during the day, you may be spared from witnessing a horrifying spirit, it's said at night the tortured souls are unearthed, roaming the grounds in search of answers. Most unsettling is the park on the property, also known as the Dead Playground. Oh gee, that sounds inviting, don't you think? Apparently it's nicknamed that as many young people are buried in the area, and visitors brave enough to see for themselves what goes on claim that at night the trapped souls of the young can be seen playing around the park, while their creepy giggles echo throughout the grounds. But whatever you do, make sure you pay respect to Mary Bibb. If you knock on her mausoleum walls, she will reply with a gentle creak of her rocking chair buried inside, but if you forget to greet her, well, she just might haunt you forever. Coming in at number 9 is Fort Morgan. Said to be one of the most haunted places in all of Alabama, Fort Morgan is rife with ghoulish tales of ghosts and strange occurrences. The most notorious is that of a prisoner who's said to have died here in the early 1900s after he took his own life in the barracks. People say that if you walk past, you can still hear him crying out late at night, but he's not the only one you should fear. There's also a female spirit that wanders the grounds in search of justice after she too lost her life after being dragged into the fort and beaten to death by mysterious attackers who were never caught for the crime. Many believe she is an angry spirit with a vengeance who will torture any man who steps foot on the property. So if I were you, I'd skip this one. Next up at number 8 is Drish House. Once the home of Dr. John R. Marsh, a gambler and a drunk who built the estate in 1835 for his beloved bride Sarah. The couple lived in the home for 32 years until one day John had too much to drink for the last time and drunkenly tumbled over the stairway, falling to his demise. But you might be surprised that it's not his spirit that's trapped here, actually his wife Sarah. While no one knows for sure what keeps her soul trapped on the property, some say she was so traumatized after finding her husband dead in their home and wasn't able to recover. Others believe, however, that she refuses to leave because her family failed to honor her own funeral wishes, and so she remains, causing trouble to anyone who steps foot on the property to this day. While today the manor is used for many celebrations, Sarah remains, tormenting guests of the events, trying to get them to leave. If you're brave enough to visit, try looking up at the 3rd story tower. It says you can catch a glimpse of her up there. Just be careful she doesn't see you looking, or she may just follow you around the property, terrorizing you until you leave. Next up at number 7, the Old Bryce Hospital. There are few places in this world more haunted than an old abandoned mental health facility, and there is no denying that the torment that went on here is a huge reason as to why so many spirits remain haunting its grounds, seeking revenge. Built during the segregation era of America, the building was branded as an insane asylum for those suffering from mental illnesses, when in reality it was pretty much a work camp for able-bodied black people who were admitted under false pretenses and then forced into slave labor, working in the fields around the hospital. Shockingly, the facility remained open until 1977 and only closed due to new desegregation laws. It comes as no surprise that after years of abuse and inhumane living conditions suffered by the so-called patients, that people claim to have had strange experiences while visiting. Those who've dared to visit the abandoned hospital claim the souls are angry, and that as soon as you walk in, you can feel the air shift. Many report hearing strange noises, and some even claim to have seen shadowy figures lurking around every corner. Next up at number 6 is St. James Hotel. For whatever reason, hotels tend to be a pretty big hotspot for paranormal encounters, and the St. James Hotel is definitely a part of that phenomenon. Back in the day it was the first hotel operated by a black congressman, and despite having many years of success, it hit hard times in the late 1800s and was eventually forced to close its doors to the public. Fast forward about 100 years to 1997 and the hotel reopened, but this time something was off about the building. Something just wasn't right. During its century-long time as an abandoned building, it became a horrifying hub for lost souls, and I guess they decided to remain, haunting all those that dare stay the night. Visitors claim seeing full-bodied apparitions sitting at the bar, or witness lights shutting off out of nowhere. But most creepy of all was a recorded visit when a psychic research team was brought in and they walked the grounds asking if anyone was there, but they never heard a response back. But later on, when they played the tapes, an older man's voice responded saying, "Well, that's a stupid question," making everyone in the room jump. So, what do you say? Are you brave enough to pay the ghosts a visit? Coming in at number 5, Cahaba Ghost Town. It likely comes as no surprise that a ghost town is also home to thousands of unsettling spirits. But few are more terrifying than Cahaba. Once the capital city of Alabama, it was abandoned after the Civil War when terrible flooding led to most of the buildings falling into complete disrepair, and so the citizens who survived were forced to leave for good. Today, nothing remains but the ruins of what used to be, including a church, a few cemeteries, and the Barker Mansion and its slave quarters. And I mean, that is just all the ingredients for a haunted ghost town if I've ever heard of one. Those that have tried to visit the once booming city recount that as soon as you enter the town's borders, cell service gets spotty and unreliable, only to be completely fine as soon as you step even 1 foot off the border of the town. While that alone might not scare visitors away, there are also countless reports of visitors witnessing terrifying apparitions and hearing the voices of the dead crying out at night for revenge. So visit at your own risk, but don't say I didn't warn you. Coming in at number 4 is the Boynton Oak. Of all the things that are usually haunted, like cemeteries, hospitals, churches, the last thing you'd likely expect to need to be afraid of was a tree. But trust me, this is no ordinary tree. The Boynton Oak is said to have grown from the grave of one Mr. Charles Boynton. As the legend goes, back in 1835, Charles was accused of friend Nathaniel Frost. Charles disputed the accusation and never once wavered from his alleged innocence. Still, he was found guilty for the crime and sentenced to execution as payback. But right before he was executed, he declared in front of everyone that a tree would spring forth from his grave as a proof of his innocence, and then they would all see that they had caught the wrong man. And shockingly, this is exactly what happened. Many claim that Charles's spirit haunts the tree above his grave, often freaking out those who come to visit. Even spookier is that some claim to have even seen him sitting under the tree waiting. But just who is he waiting for? No one knows exactly. Coming in at number 3 is Sloss Furnaces. Once built as a means to access iron ore, coal, and limestone, the Sloss Furnaces were far from a safe place to work. It's believed over the years at least 47 men lost their lives working at the furnaces due to the incredibly dangerous work conditions. But the most talked about is that of James Slag Wormwood, a former foreman of the furnaces known for being cruel to his employees and who died after slipping and falling into a pool of molten iron ore. Although there is rumor he may have been pushed by his workers, forced to the brink after his unending abuse. Still, after Wormwood's death, strange things started happening more and more frequently. Workers were seeing strange things, hearing strange noises, and started to feel like they were going crazy. Employees were being found injured or seen tripping and falling out of nowhere. Each of them recounted that an angry man covered in burns had tried to push them after screaming at them to get back to work. Then in 1971, a watchman encountered what he described as a half man, half demon who tried to push him up the stairs. After the watchman refused the spirit's advance, he was badly beaten by the entity until he fell unconscious. Later, while being examined, he was found to be covered in severe burns where he says he was beaten. So unless you're looking to be beaten up by an angry spirit and covered in burns from the blows, I might suggest a different place for your visit. Coming in at number 2 is Bear Creek Swamp. Even at the best of times, swamps give off spooky and creepy vibes, and this one might just be the worst of them all. Legend has it that many years ago, a woman's son went missing. Scared, the mother went looking for him in the nearby swamp, hoping that he had simply run away from home. But no matter how long she looked, she could never find him. It said she died in the swamp looking for him, and if you walk into the swamp today and and say, "We have your baby," 3 times, she will come out of nowhere and attack you until you leave for good. And don't even try to come back after she's banished you. You might not be so lucky the second time around. And last up today in our number 1 spot is Sweetwater Mansion. Designed by war vet General John Brahan, this mansion was named after the nearby creek and first occupied by the general's son-in-law, Robert Patton. Under Patton's jurisdiction, the basement of the mansion served as a Civil War hospital and a county jail. And if that wasn't enough, it's said that at one point someone who lived in the mansion practiced dark magic, which thinned the veil between worlds. This would make sense considering just how many people have witnessed earth-shattering apparitions that sent them running for the hills. Most notably is the casket that contains a body of a Confederate soldier in one of the downstairs rooms that will suddenly disappear right in front of your eyes. It's believed that the casket is haunted by the spirit of original owner Robert Patton, whose funeral was held at the home and who was documented having an open casket ceremony. But that's not even the scariest part. There's a room on the property that routinely locks female visitors inside. In fact, it happens so frequently that caretakers of the property have avoided entering it at all costs. And if a self-locking door and a terrifying soldier ghost don't turn you off of the property, there is also a secret room on the property with no door. The only way to enter is by a small window, and it's believed that anyone who goes in will never escape. So if I were you, I'd skip this one.
Kicking off our list at number 10, Room 206. This gives me Stephen King 1408 vibes, and I'm not sure that you're ready. Next time you visit Florida, make sure you read every customer review before you check into a hotel, because some of them might be full of ghosts. That might be a thing that you just might have to deal with. Room 206 at the Super on International Drive, apparently it's super haunted. Guests have reported the bed shaking in the middle of the night, probably terrible for your sleep, or freezing cold air even though the AC is turned off. And worst of all, guests have seen their bed look as though somebody was sleeping there moments before, even though it was perfectly made right before they checked in. Can ghosts squat? Is that legal? We've got a couple of spirit squatters in our room. Gotta move. Number 9, Disney on Ice. Many families love to visit Orlando at this time of year. The theme parks there are spectacular, especially Disney World. I went once when I was younger, but I don't recall ever seeing a real life Walt Disney. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that he died in 1966. Who knows? But never say never. One of Orlando's oldest tales is that Walt Disney had his body cryogenically frozen after his death. And right now, apparently it's being stored in a bunker underneath the theme park. I mean, that's a bit more creative than being cremated. I'll give him that. It's pretty Walt Disney of him just to freeze himself forever. A grad from the University of Central Florida Film School, Benjamin Lancaster, they actually made a film about this whole idea. It's called The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. That's a family classic, some would say. Number 8, Scarlett O'Hara's. You're gonna need 2 pieces of ID for this next one, alright? Perhaps the most haunted bar in Florida, located in St. Augustine, Scarlett O'Hara's is haunted by a past owner. Many believe that spirit likes to make itself known to guests. That's always fun. Try and go grab a pint and now you got a ghoul in front of you. That spirit is one of George Coley. Now George sadly bit the bullet one night when he was in his bathtub, so now we have a series of unexplainable events. Plates and glasses will sometimes move across the bar on their own, and the jukebox keeps playing Help Me Rhonda even when it's unplugged. So that's absolutely terrifying. If you want to check it out now, be warned, because it's a full-on tourist attraction at this point. But if you go, you can pose alongside the same bathtub that George Coley died in. Yeah, how lovely is that? Are we going to Disney World? Nah, even better, Scarlett O'Hara's. Yeah, you're gonna love it. Number 7, Stranahan House. You don't want to be stranded at the Stranahan House. It's gonna be bad news. Fort Lauderdale has a few haunted hidden gems, and the oldest house just happens to be the most haunted. What do you know? What odds are that? What odds are that? What are those odds? There we go. The house's OG owner was Frank Stranahan, and today, if you visit ye old stomping grounds, well, you might catch Frank in a photo or two. It's said that Frank still oversees the place, and he regularly shows up in guests' photos. So this ghost likes to photobomb. That's pretty amazing. I kinda like that. I suppose being trapped in the same house for all of eternity, It probably gets a little boring from time to time. Just to pop into a photo, throw some peace signs up, and then disappear back into the walls. Ivy Stranahan, Frank's late wife, she also has made an appearance or two. Nice. True love is haunting the same house forever. Guests have felt a cold hand on their shoulder, and her perfume still lingers in the hallway. Must have been some good, strong stuff. Nice. Now, it's not all fun and games. Augustus Stranahan, aka Frank's father, well, his ghost likes to throw books. It's really aggressive, so heads up for that, I guess, if you go. Cheers. Number 6, the Plaza Resort and Spa. Ah, yes, kick back and relax with ghosts. It's just what you want. You're never alone, I guess. That's a plus side. The Plaza Resort and Spa sounds like a relaxing getaway until you start looking up footage of the actual resort. One's gonna get your attention for sure. Back in August 2013, security cameras captured late night footage of this shape-shifting ghost, some sort of spirit, some scary blob. It's bad news, really, in any regard. What happened was the original building was destroyed by fire in 1909, and current staff will testify that they've seen the ghosts of victims caught in that blaze. How they know? I have no idea, but apparently they do know. It's a lot of details for one ghost appearance. One of the most common sightings includes a woman whose spirit is known to mess with the elevators and make items in the kitchen disappear. Okay, really? That last one's for sure an employee stealing food. He's like, oh yeah, I don't know. I think a ghost ate that cheesecake, boss. I don't know, spooky stuff, spooky. Number 5, the Blue Anchor Pub. Another bar, another haunted bill to pay. Here we go, debit or credit. Heading over to Delray Beach, the Blue Anchor Pub was built in 1840s in London, but the wooden interior was sent to New York City and then later on sent to Florida in 1996. So yeah, these spirits must be confused. They go from Jack the Ripper to some dude wearing a Yankees hat talking to a TV. Trapped in the wooden interior is the ghost of one Bertha Starkey, who was sadly killed by her husband back in the 1840s. Now, you know Bertha is lurking about when you hear rattling pots in the kitchen, and sometimes if you're really unlucky, you'll hear wailing in the middle of the night. Nice. Again, horrible sleep at this place. The Blue Anchor sounds like a really relaxing time, but every night at 10 o'clock, the current owners will blast a ship horn to scare away her spirit. I don't know, I feel like blaring a ship horn at 10 p.m. is more jarring than some pots and pans moving sometimes. You know what I mean? I'd rather hear the pots and pans than in the middle of the night. No way. Number 4, the Biltmore Hotel. Another hotel to avoid at all costs. Awesome, we love these ones. First of all, do you actually like staying at a hotel? Some people love it. Some people find it super relaxing. I can't help but think about what went on in the bed before me. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, why does this part of the bed feel a little bit caved in? What's going on here? Every time I'm in a hotel, I have the worst dreams and I can't sleep at all. The Biltmore Hotel in the city of Coral Gables is also one of the most haunted hotels in Florida. You've probably heard of this at some point. It all started in 1926 during initial construction. The Biltmore witnessed a foul killing on the 13th floor. The 13th floor of all floors, my God. The Biltmore was also turned into a military hotel during World War II before ultimately being closed and then abandoned later in 1968. Now, the city renovated the hotel later on in the 80s, but it didn't take long for ghost stories to start to spread. It's horrible, horrible past, I mean, more than fair. Now, of course, the most activity is on the 13th floor, so if you do check this one out, really double down, go to the haunted floor, you know, don't just look outside and then book. Go in, stay a night. I can't believe some buildings don't have a 13th floor. Can you imagine that? Well, they do, but everyone pretends that they don't, you know what I mean? They're like, yeah, it's 12. I don't know, we'll see. Are you a 13th floor believer? Comment down below. Me personally, I don't think so, because it's the 14th or the 12th. Or the 13th, I don't know anymore. No one knows anymore. It goes 11, 12, 14. You're like, really? What's the 14s? We know what's going on here, come on. Number 3, Tampa Theater. If you're a fellow theater kid, you're also gonna love this one. Here we go. Tampa Theater opened up in 1926. The theater is now said, of course, to be haunted by a woman that was struck and killed by a carriage on the property. Imagine being hit by a carriage, it's so slow. This was actually before the theater was built, so her spirit has been there for a while. If you go to Tampa Theater today, you might catch a glimpse of that woman in a white gown walking across the mezzanine hallway. This time without carriages whipping through, hopefully, sans carriage. Imagine telling somebody in front of you to sit down during a show, then they just disappear. You're like, I think that was a ghost. I think that was probably a ghost. It says in the playbill, ghost, so maybe that was her. Tampa Theater, of course, has leaned into these claims. Now they offer Ghosts of Tampa Theater Tour, where guests can learn about its haunted history. I'd love to do this tour. I don't know, maybe I'll go to Florida. Who knows? I won't. I'm like, I'm probably not going to. Number 2, Key West Cemetery. A cemetery that's haunted Get out of town. You don't say. The beachside cemetery was built in 1847. Now, it was built specifically for victims of a hurricane that occurred a year prior in 1846. That's terrible. Now, the cemetery is the final resting place for roughly 80,000 to 100,000 people. So yeah, I can only assume there's a ghost or two hanging out. That's extremely tragic. Walking through a graveyard at night is scary enough anytime, but Key West Cemetery is so specific that the entire time you're walking through, you feel connected in a way. Now, me personally, I'm all set. I don't want to feel connected to an 1846 tragedy. I'm all set. I'll go the long way around the cemetery, then I'll meet you on the other side, if anything. But if you're into this kind of thing, they also offer ghost tours, so knock yourself out. There you go. Apparently, it's too scary for children, so that's a plus. Lines will be a little shorter than usual. And finally, number 1, St. Augustine Lighthouse. A scary lighthouse? How? How is that possible? The St. Augustine Lighthouse is located, of course, in Florida and was built between 1871 and 1874. And it's considered Florida's first official lighthouse ever. Imagine that. Boom, let there be light. Hey, I made you a lighthouse. Enjoy, we're all good now. There have been several tragic events over the following years, seeing as it's the first lighthouse ever. Seen a lot of history. But even during initial construction, there were several freak accidents on site. Today, said spirits are still lurking about. Sightings of shadowy figures are common, but just one time, somebody saw a hand coming through the tower door. Yeah, a floaty hand, like from Idle Hands. How terrifying is that? Can you imagine just a Smash Bros hand just lurking near you? Several guests have reported furniture also moving around on its own, which is definitely a hazard. And one person even said that they had some of their arm hairs plucked off of them while they were in the basement. Probably that floaty weird hand just doink. Give me one of those. Another guest felt someone grab their ankle at one point while walking down a hallway, which actually caused them to trip and fall down, so something's going on. I don't know what this ghost hand wants, but it's pretty chaotic to me, it seems. I think the ghost hand wants you to click like if you like this video. I think that's what it wants, really.
And we're starting off with West Castleton. I have always wanted to go to a ghost town. I think it would be like really eerie, fun at the same time, and the town of West Castleton on Lake Bowman has long been abandoned. What once used to be a busy, bustling industrial town has been empty since the 1930s, and there are many who claim that the area is teeming with ghostly apparitions. There is one tale about 2 men who once took their boat out to visit a tavern in town but were never seen from again. The only remnants of the men was their empty rowboat found floating alone in Lake Bowman following day. Some say that on some nights when the moon is full, to have seen an empty, semi-translucent rowboat silently making its way across the water towards the abandoned town on the other side of the lake. If you're liking the channel, guys, don't forget to comment and subscribe. It really helps us out more than you probably know. All right. On to number 9. At number 9, we have Montpelier Cemetery, more specifically the Black Agnes statue, sitting atop the grave of John Hubbard, a notorious crook in the late 1800s who swindled his way into gaining his aunt's inheritance, which was meant to go to the city. He received his aunt's estate to the frustration of the city leaders, but died of liver cancer just a few years later. This statue is pretty famous for being one of the most haunted items in the state of Vermont. And just looking at it doesn't really surprise me much. I don't really believe in curses myself. I've never been cursed, at least that I know of, and I've never successfully cursed anyone else, though I have tried on a number of occasions. But looking at a statue like this, I could see why people would feel a little uneasy around it, especially upon learning that the statue is meant to be the personification of death itself, the Greek god Thanatos. It is said that if you sit on the statue's lap, you'll be met with misfortune, and if you dare sit upon it on a full moon at midnight, you will die within a week. Next on the list, we have the Brattleboro Retreat Tower. This beautiful Gothic tower sits on the grounds of Brattleboro Retreat, which is a mental health facility that still operates today, but was originally built as an asylum in 1834. This particular tower was constructed between 1887 and 1894 by patients of the asylum, with doctors believing they would benefit from physical labor, and the tower still remains, now standing abandoned. That tower has a bit of a dark history, though. There were said to be multiple cases of patients having taken their lives from the top of the tower, and in the 1920s and 30s, there were multiple things surrounding the tower that finally led to its entrance being boarded up in 1938. Those who visit the structure today claim to feel an eerie presence, even reporting having seen ghostly apparitions plummeting from the top. If I ever find myself in the area, I'd love to check it out. Aside from the ghost stuff, it'd just be really cool to hang out by this gothic tower in the middle of a forest. Glastonbury Mountain, located in Bennington County's Green Mountain National Forest, has been the breeding ground for all sorts of paranormal activity. If you decide to traverse the mountain, you just might happen across a Sasquatch or spot a UFO in the sky. There's even an Algonquin legend about a stone that devours people. And if all that isn't enough to pique your interest, the area is also said to be cursed. 5 hikers known to have gone missing in the area between 1945 to 1950. Only one body was ever found, and the cause of death was never determined. There have also been so many strange occurrences in the area. It's often referred to as the Bennington Triangle, like the Bermuda Triangle. See, you get it. Number 6, the Dutton House in Shelburne Museum. Shelburne Museum is a collection of various historical buildings, most of which have been moved to the property from other locations. And one of these structures is the Dutton House. The home was built by the Dutton family in Cavendish, Vermont in 1781. And 11 people are thought to have died in the home, and it was left abandoned for decades before being moved to the museum in 1950. Staff say they've seen some pretty strange things in there, like the sound of a little girl crying, which isn't a sight, that's something you hear, James. Anyway, but they've also seen ghostly faces in windows. Some visitors claim they've heard eerie whispers in the halls and felt an icy chill running down their spines. And there have been sightings of a transparent figure roaming the house at night. They say it's the ghost of the original owner who passed away. Some folks reckon he and his family are still lingering around. They're refusing to leave the home. Some staff are so creeped out by the place that they just refuse to go inside it entirely. Next, we have Green Mountain Inn. This inn is said to be haunted by one primary apparition, that being Boots Berry, located in Stowe. This beautiful inn, built back in 1833, pretty picturesque. Honestly, if I ever take a trip to Stowe, this is where I want to stay. But you may find yourself rooming with an extra guest. Boots Berry was said to have been born in the hotel, the son of 2 employees. As he grew up, he developed a drinking problem, though, and was eventually kicked out of the inn. Landed himself in a prison in New Orleans, but soon returned to Stowe, where he supposedly fell to his death off the roof of the Green Mountain Inn, where he apparently loved to tap dance. So some say on some nights they can hear the sounds of his tap dancing feet on the roof. Others claim to have actually seen a full-bodied apparition of Boots making his way down the corridors of the inn. Number 4, Norwich University. Some dark things are said to have happened in the walls of this prestigious institution, with its gorgeous campus nestled among the rolling hills, and has a reputation of being haunted. There's a boarded up dorm room where a long time ago 2 students were said to have taken their lives. Students and staff have reported hearing strange noises and voices emanating from the supposedly empty room. Then you have Chaplain Hall, the former library where books were said to fly and float off the shelves. Nowadays, residents report seeing strange figures roaming the hallway. You also have 2 other areas of the school that are supposedly plagued by paranormal activity: Ranson and Hawkins Hall. Many students have reported waking up unable to move or breathe, feeling like something is sitting on their chest. Sleep paralysis, it can be pretty unsettling, but I doubt there's anything paranormal going on there, especially for stressed out university students, but hey, I guess you never really truly know. Next up, we have Marble Inn, located in Fairhaven, Vermont. This inn is said to have a few different spirits that reside within the building. It was built in 1867, and one of the previous owners apparently passed away in the tea room, and apparently he was pretty upset about it too, because now he, as well as a couple other ghosts, supposedly haunt the place. Many guests have reported waking up to see the figure of a man in a gray suit standing at the foot of their bed. There was also an instance where a repairman was working on the basement and suddenly spotted a woman standing behind him, but she just remained silent before walking into another room. Repairman was obviously pretty confused, but he followed the woman into the room. When he entered it, There was nobody there. Classic ghost story. Just an empty, dark room. I wonder what the rest of this workday was like after that. How do you just go back to what you were doing after experiencing something like that? Like, if I saw a ghost, that'd just change everything for me. Oh, ghosts, I guess they just exist now. That completely changes my entire outlook on life. What happens after death? What is reality? Am I just hallucinating things now? Am I someone who hallucinates? What is going on? Anyway, these pipes, they're not gonna fix themselves. Back to work. Number 2, the Bowman House, aka Laurel Hall, regarded as one of the most haunted places in Vermont. The first owner of the home, John Bowman, is buried in a mausoleum on the property, along with the rest of his family, each of whom died tragically. Locals swear they've seen shadowy figures moving about the rooms and strange noises echo through the halls at night. Some say they hear the disembodied cry of a baby, which would really freak and irk me out, quite frankly. I can't stand babies crying in public as it is. They seem to show up everywhere I go for some reason. So last thing I need in my life is a wailing ghost baby now. Some people who visit the home even claim to have seen the ghostly figure of Mrs. Bowman standing at the top of the stairs. There are whispers of disembodied voices calling out in despair and ghostly stuff going on. Some folks claim they've even witnessed objects moving on their own. Basically, some people think it's haunted is what I'm getting at here. Number 1, we have Gold Brick Bridge, aka Emily's Bridge. Emily's Bridge in Vermont is infamous for its spooky reputation as a haunted hotspot. Not only is it said to be the most haunted place in the state of Vermont, but one of the most haunted bridges in the United States. This old covered bridge has a tale that'll send shivers down your spine. The story goes that Emily, a young lady head over heels in love, planned to elope with her sweetheart at the bridge, but for some reason, the guy just totally ditched her. Devastated and heartbroken, Emily decided to end her own life. Ever since that fateful day, folks claim to have experienced some pretty creepy stuff around Emily's Bridge. Ghostly sightings, weird noises, the feeling of being watched, and mysterious footsteps. Those are just the tip of the iceberg though. This lady gets physical. People find scratches on their cars. Some who dare to cross the bridge on foot have reported being grabbed or scratched themselves. And you know what? I gotta say, getting grabbed and scratched by a feisty female ghost, I don't hate the sound of that. Might have to book my ticket out there.
At number 10 is the Island of Dolls in Mexico. Despite its World Heritage Site status alongside Mexico City, Xochimilco has garnered a reputation for its Isla de las Muñecas, or the Island of the Dolls. Hidden amidst a labyrinth of canals, this place is famous for the countless dolls and doll parts that dangle from trees and lie scattered amongst the grass. It looks like something straight out of a horror film, but the truth behind this eerie display is even more unsettling. The island was once home to a man named Julian Santa Barea, who took up residence there. Barea's journey into the bizarre began after he found an unalived body in a nearby canal. Terrified by this tragic discovery, he started collecting dolls and displaying them around the island. He believed that these dolls had the power to ward off evil spirits and keep him safe. It's a creepy concept to say the least. For the brave souls out there, you can hire a boat and attempt to convince the driver to take you to the island. From the safety of the water, you can observe the decaying house, the hanging dolls, and the unsettling atmosphere of the place. But let me tell you folks, this is one of those locations where it's probably best to admire from afar. The Island of Dolls is steeped in disturbing history that's best left unexplored. At number 9 is Kolmanskop, Namibia. A real-life ghost town has a story that might give you the chills. See, back in 1908, it was a bustling diamond mining hub, a place of extravagance and wealth. As fate would have it, richer diamond deposits were discovered south of Kolmanskop, leading to an instant exodus of this fair-weathered inhabitants. Today, this once thriving town is an eerie, sand-filled labyrinth of abandoned houses. It's not just an ordinary ghost town. Kolmanskop is famous for its appearances in movies like Dust Devil and The King is Alive. However, it's also renowned for its sinister aura. Those dilapidated structures are far from safe, with some on the brink of collapse. Add to the ever-shifting sands, which can easily trap the unsuspecting explorer. Yet the creepiness doesn't end there. Kolmanskop is a breeding ground for the paranormal stories and eerie occurrences. Many who've dared to enter these forsaken houses have reported strange and unsettling experiences. So while it might be tempting to explore the place, it's best to leave it off your bucket list and let Kolmanskop remain undisturbed in its eerie solitude. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Most Amazing, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is George's Church in Czech Republic. This is one of those abandoned places that should stay abandoned. Built back in 1352, this church has faced its fair share of troubles. Fires kept trying to claim it over the centuries, and things got even spookier in 1968 when the roof decided to collapse during a funeral service. The congregation thought it was haunted, and they wisely steered clear. But that didn't stop robbers and vandals from having a field day with it. Fast forward to 2012, and an art student decided to give the place a new lease on life by filling it with 30 ghost sculptures. Now it's known as the Ghost Church, and tourists from all around the world snap eerie photos and hang out with these lifeless specters. It's a creepy yet fascinating place, but remember, some abandoned spots should remain abandoned for good. Don't bother the ghosts. At number 7, Marco Island Dome Homes in Florida. These bizarre sci-fi-like structures are like something straight out of a Star Wars movie. Built back in 1981, they were meant to be a super cool, eco-friendly getaway for wealthy oil tycoons' family. But nature had other plans, and Florida's unforgiving weather and rising sea turned these homes into something out of a post-apocalyptic landscape. You won't find anyone living in these homes today, as it's highly unlikely anyone ever will. They stand as testament to man's ambition and nature's power. There are all kinds of theories and legends about why they exist, but the truth is, they're just a stark reminder that even the grandest human creations can be overtaken by the environment. So if you're thinking of exploring these dome houses, be cautious, and maybe leave the Jedi robes at home. At number 6 is the Buz Ludza Monument nestled in the heart of Bulgaria. Imagine a place that looks like a UFO touchdown site. This bizarre structure was constructed towards the end of the Cold War and was intended to serve as the grandiose headquarters for the Bulgarian Communist Party. Decked out with posters of Lenin and Marx and a ceiling adorned with a glimmering red star, this place was no stranger to the strange events and political grandeur. But here's the twist. This intriguing monument was abandoned and sealed off from the public's prying eyes back in 1989. So while the temptation to explore this otherworldly dome is strong, it's vital to heed the keep out signs and respect the history this place holds, even if it means leaving your inner adventurer dormant. At number 5 is the Bielitz-Heilstatten Hospital in Germany, folks. This is a place where history and horror truly converge. This hospital's got a sinister past that'll send shivers down your spine. It's not just a spooky building, it's practically an encyclopedia of nightmares. It played host to tuberculosis patients, and if that's not eerie enough, it also tended to mustard gas and machine pew-pew victims during World War I, even harboring the infamous guy, the bad guy. Fast forward to World War II, and it was the go-to spot for fascist soldiers' medical needs. Post-World War II, the Soviets took over, using it as a military hospital until the Berlin Wall fell. Now, only a few wards are in use, but the rest, well, they're slowly being reclaimed by nature and vandals. Walk through those abandoned surgery and psychiatric wards, and you'd think you're on a set of American Horror Story Asylum. At number 4 is Power Plant IM in Charleroi, Belgium, which might pique your curiosity as it's an abandoned industrial marvel, but it's on our list of top 10 places to steer clear of for a reason. Built back in 21, that being 100 years ago, not 2, this mammoth coal-burning facility boasted a colossal cooling tower capable of chilling 480,000 gallons of water every minute during its prime. However, its energy production came at a significant environmental cost, contributing to a staggering 10% of Belgium's carbon dioxide emissions. Greenpeace took notice and successfully lobbied for its closure in 2007. While the towering remnants of the power plant IM offer an eerie, picturesque backdrop, stepping inside is a risky proposition. The abandoned structures hide potential hazards, including structural instability and toxic remnants. This isn't a journey for the faint of heart, but rather an ill-advised attempt to explore a place where safety takes a backseat. So if you're after adventure, there are certainly safer destinations to satiate your curiosity about abandoned locations. At number 3 is Kennecott, Alaska, a once bustling mining town, witnessed a flourishing copper industry worth a jaw-dropping $200 million from 1911 to 1938. That's like all kinds of billions now. It was a complete package. They had their own hospital, a skating rink, a tennis court, and even a dairy. But the years have not been kind to this place. Most of the buildings have been left to rot over 6 decades. It's a hauntingly beautiful ghost town, a snapshot of the past's glory. The National Park Service swooped in, taking control of the many structures and lands in 1998. Today you can visit the visitor center between Memorial Day and Labor Day, and if you want a unique event venue, the Recreation Hall is actually up for rent. I wouldn't. At number 2, Lake Reshen Bell Tower in Italy, a mysterious relic of the past emerging from the depths of Reshency, a product of human intervention. The eerie beauty of this 14th century tower jutting out of the water gives off a surreal, otherworldly vibe. It's a bit like something you'd find in a fairy tale, but trust me, you're not gonna be in a Disney movie here. What makes it even more intriguing is the history behind it. See, beneath the calm waters lie the remains of a submerged village intentionally sacrificed to build the dam. Their stories, hidden beneath the surface, offer a haunting reminder of the past. Though it may seem like an inviting adventure, don't be too hasty. The lake might freeze in the winter, allowing you to walk right up to the tower, but there are some dangers in doing that, obviously. At number 1, Nicosia International Airport in Cyprus. It's a real haunting place, and it's got a history that's both fascinating and eerie. Back in the day when it was a bustling airport, a place where people were coming and going, embarking on exciting journeys. But then, in 74, the Turkish invasion of Cyprus happened, and the whole landscape changed. The airport was abandoned, and what's left now is like a time capsule that's been untouched for nearly 50 years. The planes that once soared through the skies are there, but they've turned into rusty relics of aviation history, just sitting out in the open, exposed to the elements. It's like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie where the world has moved on, but this place is stuck in time. But that's not all. Inside the terminal, the check-in counters and boarding areas have all gathered thick layers of dust and occasional bird droppings. It's like a scene from a long-forgotten era. Exploring this airport may sound cool, but honestly, it's a journey that's just best left to the imagination and the history books and the YouTube videos.